The envelope wasn't supposed to matter. That's what I told myself every time I checked the mailbox, every time I passed the little metal door on the ground floor of my apartment complex, and forced myself not to hope. But when I saw it that Tuesday morning, heavy cream stock, embossed return address from a Santa Barbara law office, Ellington and Hartwell Estate Services, my knees nearly gave out, my breath locked high in my chest. For a moment, the world narrowed to the weight of that envelope in my hand. This was supposed to be the final paperwork of my grandmother's inheritance, the one thing in my life that had always carried a whisper of safety. I hadn't known the exact amount, but I'd grown up hearing the stories, how she'd put something away for me. For when the world becomes yours, she used to say. I was 28 now. The trust had finally matured. My family had spent years telling me to be patient, that it wasn't time yet, that I didn't understand how adult financial responsibilities worked. And here it was, after decades of waiting, my chance to breathe without debt, without fear, without needing anything from the people who never had space for me. My palms were sweating, my heart hammered. I tore the envelope open right there in the hallway. The check slid out first. I expected my face to break into a smile. Instead, my stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. $14,322. I stared, blinked, stared again. My grandmother had worked most of her life as a hospice nurse. She'd lived modestly, but she wasn't poor. She'd told me once, when I was 12 and she walked me to the bus stop, that she'd set aside a real start for me. So how did real start become barely enough to pay off 2 months of rent and a few grocery runs? My hands shook as I unfolded the accompanying statement. Numbers and line items blurred together, but certain phrases cut through like knives. Annual trustee management fee. Household reimbursement. Family travel expenses. Consultation fee. Marina Tate. Over and over, 10 years of deductions, 10 years of siphoning from something meant to protect me. My breath went thin. My chest tightened. I flipped the page again and again, looking for the part where someone explained this was a mistake, but it wasn't. I did the math automatically. Real estate agents are good with numbers whether we want to be or not. Between $100,000 and $130,000 gone. Legally, controlled by my parents. Disappeared into God knows what vacations and spa days and emergencies they never mentioned to me, but somehow always seemed to involve my sister Marina. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom popped up. "Sweetie, did you get your little check? Don't spend it all in one place." My hands went cold. Little check. She'd picked the exact words she knew would hurt the most. As if the inheritance wasn't supposed to be mine. As if their mismanagement of it was a joke. I barely made it inside my apartment before the tears stung. I dropped onto the couch and stared at the check sitting limply in my lap. I felt hollow. Not surprised, not exactly. More like a wound I'd ignored for decades had finally ripped open. I don't know how long I sat there before the memories started rushing in like a flood I couldn't hold back. I was 10 when my parents left me behind for the first big family vacation. Cabo, a resort with bright blue pools and white sand beaches. I'd overheard them whisper about it for weeks, the excitement practically vibrating off Marina. She was 14, older, prettier, perfect. "There's no space for everyone," Dad had said when I asked if I was coming. "We just have one room and it's barely enough for the 3 of us." I later found the reservation confirmation when Marina left her laptop open on the couch. 4-person occupancy, 2 queen beds, space for me. They just hadn't wanted me there. At 13, the story repeated with Aspen. "It's grown-up time," Mom had said. "You'll be bored." So they left me with a neighbor for 6 days. They brought Marina back a designer jacket with a fur-trimmed hood. They brought me a keychain with a plastic moose dangling from it. "Souvenir," Mom had said, and she'd laughed like it was funny. At 17, my guidance counselor called home to explain that my college prep courses required a new laptop. "We're not made of money," Dad had said to her, loud enough for me to hear in the hallway. Marina got a MacBook the next week. She needs it for her photography club, Mom explained. In college, I worked 2 jobs, one in the campus dining hall, the other waitressing until 2 in the morning, to cover what my scholarships didn't. I used to fall asleep over textbooks at the counter of the 24-hour laundromat because it was warm and no one asked questions. Meanwhile, Marina went on a 6-week wellness retreat in Maui. She posted photos of oceanfront yoga and organic smoothies with captions like, "So blessed." I ate instant ramen from the dollar store and pretended I was fine, and now I knew exactly who paid for her retreat. I pressed my palms into my eyes and forced myself to breathe. When I finally lowered my hands, the check was still there. The truth was still there. The betrayal didn't magically shrink just because I tried to blink it away. I reached for my phone again and opened the banking app, staring at my balance. Rent was due in a week. My car needed a new timing belt. The commission from my last sale had already gone to student loans. And the trust, my one lifeline, was a gutted carcass with a bow on it. My chest cramped. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Another buzzing sound vibrated across the coffee table. A notification from social media. A tag. I clicked without thinking. It was a photo of my parents, Marina, her husband, and their little boy. All of them smiling in front of a private cabana on a beach, hands wrapped around margaritas, sunglasses, sun-kissed skin, perfect family photo. Caption, "Cabo Round 2 with the Tate crew, no better way to celebrate life." The timestamp said yesterday. They were in Cabo yesterday. They'd gone again, without telling me, without inviting me, and this time, my stomach twisted. They'd used my grandmother's money to do it. I locked my phone, set it face down, and sat in the silence that followed. My apartment felt smaller than ever, like the walls were leaning in, squeezing out every drop of air. I couldn't stay there a second longer. I grabbed my bag and keys and left. Dusk had settled over the city, painting the sidewalks in soft blues and golds. I drove 40 minutes north to my Aunt May's house, the one place that had never felt like a trap. May lived in a quiet neighborhood tucked under tall pines, where wind chimes clinked gently on porches, and people waved when you drove by. She opened the door before I even knocked. "There you are, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender lotion and roasted chicken. She held me longer than usual, her arms tight and steady. When she finally pulled back, she cupped my face. "You look pale. What's wrong?" I opened my mouth, but my throat closed up. She didn't push. She never pushed. Inside, her husband, Franklin, stood over the stove wearing his old flannel shirt, flipping chicken thighs in a sizzling cast-iron pan. He smiled when he saw me, deep lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. "Just in time, kiddo. Grab a plate." Their kitchen was warm and cozy, cluttered in the comfortable way that meant a family lived there, not a curated Instagram page. A quilt hung over the back of the couch. A stack of board games sat in the corner. The table was nicked from years of elbows and homework sessions. Every inch of it felt like shelter. Dinner was simple. Chicken, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, but it tasted like comfort, like someone had cooked with me in mind. I hadn't realized how starved I was for that. Franklin handed me the biggest, juiciest piece of chicken without a second thought. "This one's for you," he said. It was so small, so ordinary, but something cracked in me, cleanly, like a bone that had been broken for years and finally set right. Midway through dinner, my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, until I saw the name of the property, Montera East Commercial Development. I blinked. That was my biggest sale of the quarter. The deposit notification clicked in. $50,000. Commission cleared. A deal I'd negotiated over 60 days, juggling contractors and permitting offices and inspectors who barely tolerated me. I'd fought tooth and nail for that sale. I'd earned it with grit they never thought I had. I stared down at the glowing screen, unable to speak. When I finally looked up, Franklin and May were watching me. "What is it?" May asked gently. I swallowed hard. "I closed a big deal. The commission just came through." Franklin grinned. "Atta girl." And just like that, a realization washed over me. Warm, sharp, soft, painful, true. I had spent my whole life begging the wrong people to see me, fighting to earn scraps of affection from people who never intended to give it. I'd let them tell me who I was, what I deserved, what space I was allowed to take up in the world. But here, at this worn wooden table, in this small house filled with real, unconditional love, I was seen. I was valued. I was wanted. Not because I was convenient, not because they needed something from me, but because they cared. I set my phone down and took a long breath. Then another. May reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "Whatever happened today," she said softly, "you don't have to face it alone." For the first time in years, I actually believed her. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Mom called me 3 times before I answered. At first I told myself I was ignoring her because I needed space, because I needed to breathe, because if I heard her voice too soon after opening that horrifying trust statement, I might scream or cry or say something that would give her the satisfaction of thinking she'd gotten under my skin. But the truth was simpler. Some part of me, the obedient, trained part, still reacted like a child who'd been taught that ignoring a parent was an act of violence. So, when the 4th call buzzed through, I stepped outside onto Aunt May's porch, hugged my sweater tight around myself, and finally swiped to accept. Her voice hit me instantly, syrupy sweet in a way that never meant good news. "Lana? Honey? There you are. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon." I stared at the pine trees swaying in the cold wind. "I know. I've been busy." "Oh, of course, you always are, working so hard, doing your little real estate thing. We're all just so proud of you." She let out a laugh that didn't reach her throat. "Anyway, I wanted to check in since today was supposed to be the big day." My jaw tightened. "The trust distribution." "Yes, that," she said lightly. "Well, did you get your little check?" There it was, the exact phrase she'd used in her text. Little check. A tiny dagger wrapped in satin. "I got something," I said carefully. "Oh, wonderful!" She clapped her hands. I could hear it through the phone. "I knew it would come together eventually. See? All that panic about money was unnecessary." Then she sighed dramatically. "If only you'd been patient instead of creating tension." Tension. That was her favorite word to use when she wanted to blame me for my own hurt. I leaned against the porch railing, watching Franklin inside through the window, rinsing dishes in the sink. "Mom," I said slowly, "there's something we need to talk about." A sharp inhale. "Lana, please don't start. You always want to ruin a perfectly nice moment." "I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just— What? What now?" Her voice hardened in an instant. The sweetness was gone. "Your sister and I have had a long day, and Marina is already upset because you didn't comment on her Cabo photos." I blinked. "I didn't know you went." "Well, of course we went," she said, as if I were the unreasonable one. "You know your father's company gives him that timeshare, and Marina needed a break after all her hard work with River. We barely managed to get a room big enough for the 3 of us." I closed my eyes, feeling the old, familiar burn behind them. "There were 4 of you." Silence. Then, "We didn't think you'd want to come." There it was. The story I'd heard my entire life. Not enough space. Not enough rooms. Not enough beds. Not enough reason to bring me. Always some fabricated logistical obstacle to mask the truth. They simply hadn't wanted me there. "I'm not doing this," I whispered more to myself than to her. "Doing what?" she snapped. "Making everything about you? Starting drama?" The porch door creaked open, and Aunt May stepped out carrying a blanket. She wrapped it over my shoulders without a word, just a warm, steadying touch, and went back inside. I swallowed hard. "Look," Mom continued in a tone that meant she was preparing a pitch, "I'm calling because we have the most exciting news. We're planning a Christmas trip to Aspen, a whole family getaway. It's going to be magical. Snow, cocoa, fireplaces, the whole thing. A cold fist tightened around my ribs. Okay. And, she went on, we really want you there this time. This time. The words were a trap, a baited hook. Who's going? I asked. Well, your father, of course, and Marina and her husband and River, and 2 of Marina's friends. Such sweet girls, and, oh, possibly River's nanny if she can make it. You know how children are. So, everyone but me, until now. So where would I sleep? I asked, a small pause. Well, we're not entirely sure yet. Maybe the living room, or perhaps you could share with the nanny. We'll figure it out when we get there. I felt my spine straighten. Mom, I said gently, that doesn't sound like an actual invitation. Oh, don't be ridiculous, she snapped. You always get like this. You make everything so dramatic. We are trying to include you. I almost laughed. I swallowed it instead. Mom, if you really want me there, why didn't you call before booking everything? Why didn't you ask me if I was available? Well, she said, voice dipping into faux sorrow, we assumed you'd be grateful. We assumed you'd appreciate being thought of after everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me. My head spun. Lana, she continued briskly before I could respond, there is one small thing. The villa was, well, a bit outside our usual budget. So we need everyone to contribute. Just a little, $2,000 each. By Friday. I closed my eyes. $2,000? Yes, sweetheart, she said brightly. And since Marina might want to attend some evening events, we'd need you to help with River at night, just to keep an eye on him while she's out. You're so good with him. The cold wind cut across my face, but the chill inside my chest had nothing to do with the weather. So, you want me to pay $2,000, I said quietly, to sleep on a couch or share with a nanny, and babysit? Well, she said lightly, when you put it that way it sounds harsh, but we all contribute. That's what families do. No, I said, that's not what families do. What's that supposed to mean? My throat tightened, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. Families don't leave someone behind every single vacation. Families don't use someone's inheritance for their own trips and then mock the amount left. Families don't call only when they need money or childcare. She let out a sharp laugh. Inheritance? You mean that tiny little check? Oh, Lana, don't be childish. Your father and I did the best we could managing it. You drained it. We used it responsibly, she said through gritted teeth, on things meant to improve the family. You never understood that. Mom, I whispered, you used my grandmother's money for Cabo and Aspen. You used it to buy Marina a laptop. You used it for retreats and wellness weekends and things that had nothing to do with me. That is completely unfair, she snapped. You know Marina's opportunities benefit all of us. She built a platform that reflects positively on the entire family, and besides, you should be grateful. We handled everything for you so you wouldn't have to worry. Grateful, I repeated. The word tasted like metal. You're being unkind, she added. Ungrateful, thoughtless. Marina cried when she heard you weren't coming to Aspen. I never said I was going. Well, you're certainly not making it easy to include you. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, grounding myself in the warmth. Mom, I said softly, I'm not going to Aspen. I'm not paying $2,000. I'm not babysitting. I'm not doing this anymore. Silence. Then, what did you just say? I said no. You will not disrespect me like this, she hissed. You are ruining this family. You always do this, always turning things into personal attacks. I'm not attacking anyone. Then why are you behaving like this? She demanded. Because I finally see what's happening, I said. I finally see how I've been treated all these years. She inhaled sharply. If you hang up now, Lana. Her voice dropped into that low, dangerous register she used when I was a teenager, and she wanted me terrified. If you walk away from this, you shouldn't expect us to include you in things anymore. I laughed, a soft, stunned sound. You already don't. Well, she said coldly. "Don't come crying to us when you realize you need your family, because we won't be waiting." "I know," I said. "You never have been." Before she could answer, I ended the call. My thumb hovered for a second over her contact name. Then I hit block. I stood there on the porch, the cold air sliding under my sweater, feeling strangely steady despite the trembling in my fingers. I exhaled long and slow, and the breath fogged in the air like smoke leaving my body. The door opened behind me. Franklin stepped out, leaning his shoulder against the doorframe. "Everything okay out here?" "No," I said honestly, "but I think it will be." He nodded, as if that was all he needed to hear. "Good. Dinner's ready, and there's plenty." Plenty. The word settled into me like warmth. I followed him inside, closing the door on the cold night and everything that no longer had power over me. I woke up before the sun, the kind of early morning where the world still felt soft and half-formed. I lay on the couch in Aunt May's living room, wrapped in one of her crocheted blankets, listening to the gentle hum of the old heater and the faint clatter of pans in the kitchen. For a moment, I let myself pretend I was 13 again, sleeping over after a fight with my parents, pretending everything was fine because I didn't want to go home. A warm smell drifted through the house. Vanilla, butter, something toasty. Waffles. My stomach growled. I rubbed my eyes, sat up, and glanced toward the kitchen. May was standing at the counter wearing her faded pine green robe, humming softly as she whisked batter. She glanced over her shoulder the second she heard my footsteps. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice the kind of soft that makes you want to cry for reasons you can't name. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some," I lied. "Your couch is dangerously comfortable." She smiled knowingly. "Mm-hmm." I sat at the table, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The chair cushions were mismatched, one plaid and one floral, and the table had a small nick on the edge where Ruby had dropped a mixing bowl when she was 8. Everything about this house was imperfect in the way that made it feel safe. Speaking of Ruby, her footsteps thundered down the stairs a moment later. She appeared with her curly hair sticking out in every direction and a mug that said, "Technically, I'm right," in bold letters. She froze when she saw me. "Whoa, are we having a sleepover? And no one told me?" I laughed weakly. "Just an unplanned one." She squinted at me over her mug. "Wait, did the trust fund stuff come through?" The question hit me square in the chest, sharper than she meant it to be. I must have flinched, because her eyes widened immediately. "Oh, crap," she whispered. "It was bad," I nodded, swallowing hard. She sat down across from me, pushing her mug aside like she suddenly didn't care about caffeine. "Want to talk about it?" Before I could answer, Franklin walked in from the backyard door, tracking in a bit of cold morning air. He was wearing his flannel jacket and holding a small bucket of eggs from the coop behind the house. He took one look at me and set the bucket down slowly. "Everything all right, kiddo?" The lump in my throat tightened. I didn't know how to tell them that everything inside me felt shattered and raw. So instead I shrugged, even though we all knew it meant the opposite. Franklin didn't push. Instead, he cracked the eggs into a bowl, whisked them with practiced movements, and said gently, "You always sit tall when something hurts. You know that?" I blinked. "What?" "You're hunched when you're tired, straight when you're upset," he said, sliding a bowl of fruit to my side of the table. "Saw it a mile away." I couldn't help laughing, even as my eyes burned. "Is that a real thing?" "Yep," he said. "You got it from your grandmother." At the mention of her, my chest pinched again. "I miss her," I whispered. May turned from the stove. Her eyes softened. "Me too." She set a plate of golden waffles in front of us and poured syrup into a ceramic pitcher shaped like a chicken. The steam from the food curled into the air like a small offering of comfort. As we ate, I told them everything. About the check, the deductions, the dozen years of fees and reimbursements and lies. I watched their faces shift as the truth settled. Franklin's jaw went tight. May stopped mid-bite. They used your inheritance, May said slowly, to fund vacations, to buy marina things. And travel consultants, I added, and wellness retreats, and some weird legal consultation I never approved. Ruby choked on her juice. You're kidding. I wish. What legal consultation? May asked, a sharp, almost protective edge in her voice. I pulled the sheet from my bag and handed it across. This one. May scanned the line. Consultation fee. Ellington Legal Group. $3,240. And her expression changed. Her brows pinched in recognition. I know that firm, she said. Your father used them years ago. Some kind of family issue he never told anyone about. A chill crawled up my spine. Family issue? He told me it was nothing, she said. But your grandmother, she didn't believe him. Before I could ask more, she wiped her hands and disappeared into the hallway closet. A moment later, she returned holding a small wooden box I didn't recognize. Her fingers hesitated on the lid before she opened it. Inside was a folded slip of paper. This, she said, handing it to me, is something your grandmother gave me. She asked me to keep it safe, only to give it to you if she passed before your 21st birthday. My breath hitched. Why didn't you show me before? She hesitated, then said quietly, Your parents told me they already shared this with you. They said you'd received a full copy. My heart stuttered. They lied. I know that now. She gestured gently. Go on, read it. The paper was thin, the ink faded in places. My grandmother's handwriting, looping and trembling with age, stared up at me. Lana, if anything goes wrong with the trust, keep receipts. Protect yourself. Love doesn't hurt, and it doesn't take what wasn't given. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling warmth rise behind my ribs. Ruby leaned over my shoulder. Your grandmother was a badass, she whispered. She was, I said thickly. Franklin cleared his throat, trying and failing to hide the emotion on his face. Your parents shouldn't have been able to touch that much money without oversight. They were trustees, I said. They had legal authority. Authority doesn't equal integrity, he muttered. We fell into a thoughtful silence until Ruby sat forward, elbows on the table, voice bright with outrage. Okay, but can we talk about the fact that they left you behind, like, constantly? That's not normal. I know, I said. I always knew. No, she insisted, eyes sharp. You rationalized it. That's different. Her words rattled something deep inside me. I flashed back to 10-year-old me waving from the driveway as my family drove off to Cabo. The lie about hotel capacity. The empty spot at graduation. The nights I worked until dawn while my sister slept in beachside resorts. Every time they left, I said slowly, I told myself I deserved it. That I wasn't fun enough. Or pretty enough. Or good enough. That wasn't you, May said firmly. That was them. I looked at her, at Franklin, at Ruby. These three people who had never left me behind. Never made me feel small. Never told me I was an inconvenience. And for the first time, the truth came into focus with startling clarity. Family wasn't blood. It was who stayed. I'm so tired, I whispered. I'm tired of being the one they leave out. Franklin reached across the table and put his hand over mine. You're not left out here. I swallowed hard. I know. Something warm and fragile and brave swelled inside me. I didn't recognize the feeling at first, but then I realized it was anger. Clean, sharp, earned anger. Not explosive, not childish. Just a steady heat rising after years of being smothered. Ruby saw it first. You're pissed, she said softly. I think I am, I admitted. Good, she said. You deserve better than them. Just then my phone, which I'd left on the counter, buzzed. Once, twice, a third time. May stood, grabbed it, and walked it over to me. Who is it? I looked at the screen. Mom. Calling again. My pulse flickered, panic rising. But then, It steadied. I wasn't alone in my silent apartment anymore. I was here, surrounded by people who loved me without conditions. I should answer, I murmured. You don't have to, May said. I know. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't dread that made me pick it up. It was resolve. I hit accept. I held the phone to my ear, and my voice didn't shake when I said, hello? From across the table, I felt May and Franklin watching me, not hovering, not pressing, just present. And somehow that presence made everything inside me settle. Lana, Mom said, sharp and breathless, we need to talk. I'm listening. Good, she said briskly, because you've made a mess of things. A slow breath filled my lungs. Here we go, I thought, not with fear, but with clarity. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on unstable ground. Lana, you cannot keep behaving like this. Mom's voice sliced through the line before I even finished saying hello. You are creating chaos for no reason at all. I sat at Aunt May's kitchen table, fingers tightening around the edge of the wooden surface. The morning light streamed through the window, catching dust motes in the air. May was rinsing dishes. Franklin pretended to read the newspaper but kept glancing over it every few seconds. Ruby hovered by the fridge door, frozen like she'd wandered into a scene she didn't want to interrupt. Yes, I said softly, you said we needed to talk. Well, Mom huffed, as if I'd inconvenienced her. First, your tone. You sound defensive already. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, I just picked up the phone. Exactly, she snapped. There's no need to be dramatic. We are your family. We're trying to help you and everything turns into conflict with you lately. Conflict. With her lately. The irony stung. What did you want to talk about? I asked, keeping my voice even. Her tone shifted instantly into performative sweetness. Sweetheart, we have exciting news. Truly wonderful news. We've planned a family Christmas trip to Aspen. Ruby, who was drinking juice, choked so loudly Franklin startled. Mom kept going. Snow-covered mountains, hot cocoa by the fireplace, carriage rides, just magical. And we want you there. That last line was delivered with the enthusiasm of someone announcing they found a coupon. Okay, I said cautiously. Who's going? Oh, the usual, she said lightly. Your father, Marina, her husband, Little River, and 2 of Marina's friends. I blinked. 2 of her friends? Well, they're practically family, she breezed. Just wonderful girls, very supportive of Marina's brand. And me? I asked. Well, of course, she said. Offended, I'd even ask. If we can make space. Make space, I repeated. Yes, dear. The villa only has 3 bedrooms, but we'll figure something out. Maybe you could share with the nanny if she ends up coming. I stared at the table, the knots in the wood blurring. So I'd sleep on a couch or share with a stranger. Oh, Lana, she said, voice dripping with false exasperation. Why do you always take things so personally? We are inviting you. Isn't that what matters? There was a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with sadness. It doesn't feel like much of an invitation. She ignored that. Anyway, there's just one tiny thing. Since the villa was, well, let's say generous in price, we need everyone to contribute. There it was. How much? I asked. Only $2,000, Mom said brightly. We need it wired by Friday, and Marina asked if you could help with River a few evenings while we're there. She has some influencer events she simply can't miss. I felt the heat crawl up the back of my neck. So you want me to pay $2,000 and be the babysitter? Lana, she snapped, family contributes. Marina and her husband already gave us their share. We expected you to do the same. And the nanny? I asked. Oh well, she stumbled. We're hoping to keep costs low by having you step in. You don't mind helping your sister, do you? I closed my eyes. Mom, I can't give you that money. Silence. Dead, cold silence. Excuse me? She said finally, with an edge that made the tiny hairs on my arms lift. I can't pay for a trip I wasn't included in the planning of. I wasn't asked if I was available. I wasn't even told. We assumed you'd be grateful, she said, her voice sharpening. You never make anything easy. Ever. You always look for the negative, always create drama. I'm just trying to be honest. No, she snapped. You're being ungrateful, completely ungrateful after everything we've done for you. She took a breath, and I heard Marina's voice somewhere behind her, muffled but furious. Your sister is upset again. She said you didn't like any of her Cabo photos. I didn't know you were in Cabo, I said quietly. Of course you knew, she said quickly. You always want to play the victim. We didn't invite you because we assumed you were busy. With what? With your little real estate hobby. My stomach tightened. Mom, that's my job, she scoffed. Please, Lana, you sell condos. Marina is the one with real ambition. The kitchen went still. Even the heater seemed to pause. I'm done with this conversation, I said softly. You will not walk away, she hissed. Not from me, not from your family. If you hang up right now, don't expect us to include you anymore. You already don't include me. That is your interpretation, she snapped. And it's wrong, completely wrong. You twist everything. Mom, you used my trust fund, I said. You used it for Cabo and Aspen and retreats and things that had nothing to do with me. That money was under our responsibility, she yelled. We used it for family necessities, things that benefited all of us. Things that benefited Marina, I corrected. Not me. You are delusional, she spat. Completely unhinged. Your father said this would happen, that the pressure would get to you, that you weren't ready for adult responsibilities. A chill slid down my spine. What does that mean? It means, she snapped, if you keep pushing, we will freeze the funds until you're 50, or longer, if that's what it takes to keep this family stable. It took me a second to realize what she said, another second to understand she wasn't talking about the trust fund anymore. The trust was gone, drained. She was threatening my reputation, my job, my stability. Behind me, May took a step closer, her presence calm and grounding. Franklin folded his paper silently, jaw twitching. I inhaled slowly, my voice quiet but unwavering. Mom, the trust is dissolved. There's nothing left to control. Another pause, then a cold, sharp inhale. You little... I hung up. My thumb hovered for a moment, then pressed block. My hands were shaking, adrenaline crashing into my ribs, but the strange thing, the thing that shocked me most, was that I wasn't scared. Not the way I used to be. I felt lighter. When I looked up, May's eyes were already on me. Honey, she whispered, come sit. I sat. She handed me a warm mug of tea. The smell of chamomile wrapped around me like a blanket. That wasn't a family conversation, Franklin said gruffly, setting the newspaper aside. That was extortion. Ruby leaned forward, eyes fierce. And gaslighting, and manipulation, seriously next-level manipulation. I exhaled shakily. I knew it would be bad, but I didn't expect... That, May finished gently. We know. I stared down into the tea. She said I was ruining the family. That's not your burden, Franklin said, and that they've done everything for me. Translation, Ruby muttered. You've done everything for them and they want more. I let out a single shaky laugh. That sounds about right. May reached over, placing her hand over mine. You are not wrong for asking for respect. Her words settled into me like sunlight breaking through clouds. I think I'm finally seeing it, I whispered. All of it, clearly. Franklin nodded once, firm. Good. We sat like that, quiet, steady, together, until the front door rattled with a gust of wind. The house creaked. And I felt something shift inside me, small but monumental. I'm not going to Aspen, I said finally. Good, Ruby said without hesitation, and I'm not paying anything. Even better, Franklin added, and I'm not their babysitter. There it is, May whispered, smiling softly. A long breath left my chest. like I'd been holding it in for years. My phone buzzed on the table. A long message preview flashed across the screen. Mom's number, still unblocked in the text thread. The words were sharp enough to read without opening it. Your father will hear about this disrespect. You will regret. Franklin picked up the phone before I could. You want me to block her? I looked at him, then at May, then at Ruby, my real family. Yes, I said, please. He tapped a few buttons and set the phone down again. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Ruby broke the silence with a grin. So, who wants waffles round 2? And somehow, impossibly, I laughed. A real laugh. One that didn't hurt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a scared daughter bracing for the fallout. I was a woman drawing a line. And I wasn't drawing it alone. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I turned off the lamp in the guest room Aunt May had set up for me, curled under the quilt she'd sewn years ago, and shut my eyes. But the darkness behind my eyelids felt louder than anything outside. Every time I drifted close to sleep, my mind snapped awake with a jolt. Echoes of my mother's voice, the ugly twists in her tone, the way she'd threatened me like it was nothing, like it was normal. By 4 a.m, I gave up. I slipped quietly out of bed and padded barefoot into the living room, grabbing my laptop from my bag. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional pop from the heating vents as they adjusted to the early winter chill. I curled up on the couch, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and opened my email. I told myself I just needed to ground myself in something practical: work, schedules, client messages, anything that didn't involve the wounds of the last 24 hours. At the top of my inbox sat an unread email with the subject line, Commission Release, Montera East. My heart gave a small, startled jump. I clicked it. $50,000. Deposited. Cleared. The number glowed on the screen like some kind of impossible magic, a reminder that not everything in my life was controlled by people who wished I would stay small forever. I traced the number with the mouse pointer, staring at it for a long moment. $50,000. Money I earned. Money that wasn't tied to guilt or shame or manipulation. Money that came from closing a deal nobody thought I could handle. Money that validated every long night I'd spent hunched over spreadsheets and contracts trying to prove, to myself even more than others, that I was capable. My throat tightened. I should have felt triumphant, relieved, empowered. Instead, I felt a strange ache behind my ribs, like I had been waiting my whole life for someone, even myself, to acknowledge that I wasn't a burden. I closed my eyes and let the feeling wash over me. Then I opened them and typed one single phrase into my browser. Best places to escape family drama. The results loaded in an instant, and I snorted softly through my nose. Lists popped up with titles like Top Solo Retreats in the U.S. and 20 Getaways for Emotional Reset. But the sidebar showed something different. Oceanfront villas in Malibu, private, serene, family-sized. I clicked before I even thought about it. Photos filled the screen. Sun-washed decks overlooking waves, fire pits under starlight, sleek living rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, bedrooms with white sheets that looked softer than clouds, infinity pools shimmering like liquid glass. Then a listing caught my breath. Malibu Tide Residence, $28,000, 7 nights, all-inclusive, private deck, oceanfront, 2 bedrooms plus loft. It looked unreal, like a painting, like a world where no one screamed at you on the phone or told you to sleep on a couch while you paid for their vacation. A world where peace was possible. I leaned closer, scrolling through pictures. A laugh bubbled up, soft and incredulous. This is insane, I whispered to myself. But my chest kept fluttering. A creak came from the hallway. I glanced up to see Ruby standing there in oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, Caffeinate, Dominate, Repeat. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. What are you doing up? She asked, shuffling closer. Couldn't sleep, I said. She collapsed beside me like a sleepy cat, peering at the bright laptop screen. What's that? A villa, I said. In Malibu. Her face lit up instantly. Malibu? Like celebrity Malibu? I chuckled. Yes. That Malibu. Ruby blinked at the screen, then looked at me, then looked back. Wait. Are you thinking of going? Maybe, I said softly, just to breathe. Ruby leaned forward, staring at the images. If I had $50,000, she said thoughtfully, I'd take the people who love me somewhere they can finally breathe. I froze. She turned, meeting my eyes. Not saying you should do anything, just saying peace is worth investing in, and so are the people who give you peace. Her words hit somewhere deep, somewhere still hurting but trying so hard to heal. I clicked off the listing and closed the laptop, overwhelmed. I can't make a decision like this at 4 a.m. Ruby shrugged. 4 a.m. decisions are usually the realest ones. She stood, stretched, and wandered back to her room without another word. But the idea didn't leave. Not after I brushed my teeth and tried to sleep again. Not when I woke at 7 to the smell of coffee. And especially not when I came downstairs and found a small envelope on the table, one I didn't recognize. May was sipping her tea, her reading glasses perched on her nose. That was in your purse, she said gently. You might have missed it last night. I frowned and picked it up. The handwriting on the front made my breath catch. My grandmother's handwriting. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside was a single note, written with her usual shaky script. Lana, give generously when the time is right. Don't let bitterness guide your choices. Love yourself the way I wanted to love you longer. Grandma tears filled my eyes instantly. I lowered the letter and May stood, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. She always knew, she whispered. She always knew how they were. I nodded into her shoulder, heart aching and steadying at the same time. When we pulled apart, I breathed deeply, grabbed my laptop again and reopened the Malibu listing. May raised an eyebrow. Planning an escape? Planning a thank you, I said quietly. Then I scrolled to the bottom of the page and clicked Check Availability. A week in December was open. The total cost after taxes, $28,472. Franklin whistled low when he walked in and saw the screen. That's one fancy getaway. I know, I said, voice shaking slightly. But you two have done more for me than anyone ever has. I want to give you something real. May's hand flew to her chest. Lana, I mean it, I said. You fed me when they forgot I existed. You came to my plays and my recitals when they didn't bother. You were there for every heartbreak, every breakdown, every time I didn't know how to keep going. You've been my real family since before I knew what that meant. I clicked the Book Now button, my pulse racing. The confirmation page loaded. Are you sure about this? Franklin asked softly. Yes, I said, louder than I'd meant to. Yes, I'm sure. The loading circle spun. And then, your booking is confirmed. Malibu Tide Residence, December 14th, 21. 4 guests. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. May sat down heavily. Lana, sweetheart, this is too much. It's not enough, I said. Ruby burst into the room then, saw the screen and screamed, We're going to Malibu! I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. I spun the laptop toward them. Pack your bags, I said. We're going to Malibu. May covered her face, laughing and crying at the same time. Franklin stood behind her, rubbing her shoulders, his eyes suspiciously glassy. Ruby grabbed my hands. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is insane. This is the coolest thing anyone has ever done for this family. Her excitement was contagious, warm, healing. As I stood there in May's kitchen, wrapped in their joy, their shock, their love, something inside me finally clicked into place. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for a seat in someone else's family. I was choosing my own. And choosing the people who had chosen me all along. The drive down the Pacific Coast Highway felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 28 years. Light spilled across the ocean in sheets of gold, the early afternoon sun catching the waves and turning them into something unreal. Ruby had her phone pressed to the window, filming everything she could, narrating in the excited whisper of someone who couldn't believe real life looked like this. Franklin gripped the steering wheel with both hands, as if he didn't quite trust the beauty outside to stay where it was. Aunt May sat beside him, smiling quietly, her eyes soft and shimmering. I sat in the back, watching the ocean roll and break, thinking that peace had a color, and it was this blue. "We're close," Ruby said, checking the directions on her phone. "0.6 miles until the turnoff." "Oh my God, you guys, this is wild," Franklin grunted. "Hope they have parking," Ruby snorted. "Dad, it's a $28,000 villa. They have parking." May looked back at me. "Are you doing okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, tucking my hands under my thighs to hide the tremble. "I'm good, just taking it in." The truth was, I didn't know how to take it in. I'd never been on a trip like this. I'd never been somewhere meant to soothe the soul rather than impress someone's Instagram feed. The vacations my parents took without me, Aspen, Cabo, Tahoe, had always been plastered with luxury. This wasn't the same. Malibu felt like it wanted to hold you rather than display you. Ruby squealed suddenly. "Turn here! Oh my God, that's it! That's the villa!" Franklin eased the car onto a narrow private road, lined with tall eucalyptus trees that cast trembling shadows across the pavement. At the end of the drive sat a sleek, modern house perched on a cliff, the entire backside made of glass overlooking the ocean. Sunlight poured across its white exterior, warm and inviting. I felt something twist behind my ribs. Not panic, not fear, but something dangerously close to awe. Franklin parked the car. We stepped out, and the salty breeze wrapped around us instantly, warm and fragrant with sea spray and distant jasmine. Ruby stood frozen for a second before she raised her hands in the air and shouted, "We are living rich today!" Her voice echoed off the cliffside. May burst into laughter. Inside the villa, everything was bright wood and soft whites, the simplicity somehow luxurious. The living room opened into a sprawling deck with a glass-bottom viewing panel revealing swirling turquoise water below. A private hot tub hummed quietly. Beyond it, the ocean stretched like an endless invitation. Ruby rushed to the edge of the deck and pressed her face against the railing. "Lana, look! You can literally see fish from the living room. I'm going to live stream the dolphins when they come by. Do dolphins even come by? I don't care, I'll manifest them." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. Manifest away. Franklin stepped into the kitchen, running his calloused fingers over the marble counter. "I feel like I need to wash my hands before touching anything." "You do not," May said, swatting at him gently. "Just enjoy it." Enjoy it. The words settled into me like something sacred. We spent the first hour wandering through the rooms, admiring everything from the rainfall showers to the cozy reading nook overlooking the water. Ruby claimed the loft immediately, flopping onto the massive beanbag with dramatic flair. Franklin unpacked groceries he'd insisted on bringing, despite the villa offering an all-inclusive private chef. By late afternoon, we all gravitated toward the deck again. The sun was slipping toward the horizon, staining the sky in streaks of peach and lavender. "This isn't real," Ruby whispered, lifting her phone. "I feel like we fell into someone else's life." "It's real," Franklin said quietly, sitting in one of the deck chairs. "And it's ours this week." His voice cracked just slightly on the last word. I looked at him, and the truth hit hard. He'd spent most of his life giving, rarely receiving, rarely resting, and now he was sinking into this peace like it was something he'd forgotten he deserved. May came out with 2 glasses of iced tea and passed one to me. "Thank you for bringing us here, Lana." I swallowed past the tightness in my throat. "You brought me here long before I could afford any of this." Her eyes softened. "Still, this means something. To all of us." We watched the sun lower toward the water, the sky dimming into a dreamy brilliance that felt almost unreal. The waves hit the rocks below with a steady rhythm, like the ocean breathing along with us. After a while, Ruby slipped back inside to set up her camera on the deck. Okay, she announced. Day 1 in Malibu. Courtesy of the actual best cousin ever. Let's document the vibes. I groaned. Ruby. Too late, she chirped, angling her phone to catch the sunset behind me. Smile like you're not emotionally recovering from generational trauma. Franklin snorted. May burst out laughing so hard she nearly dropped her tea. I turned away, covering my face, but Ruby kept filming the deck, the villa, the shimmering water. She narrated everything like a travel host, and somehow watching her joy made it easier to breathe. As she filmed, her camera caught something else. Franklin sitting in the golden light with his fingertips brushing the arm of his chair, fighting tears he didn't want us to see. His face was a map of weathered kindness, lines etched with decades of labor and quiet sacrifice. He's going to cry, Ruby whispered conspiratorially from behind the phone. Dad, you emotional beast. Franklin cleared his throat loudly, glaring half-heartedly. I'm not crying, the sun's in my eyes. The sun is behind you, Ruby said. Doesn't matter. We all laughed. It felt like the kind of moment memory would hold on to for years. Later, when we wandered down the beach, barefoot in the damp sand, I walked beside May while Ruby darted across the shoreline hunting for sea glass, and Franklin tested the temperature of the water with his toes. You seem lighter, May said. I took a long breath. I feel lighter. She slipped an arm through mine. You deserve this, all of it. I'm still processing. That's okay, she said. Healing doesn't have to be fast. We walked a little farther until the sky darkened completely, painted with the first few stars. I keep thinking, I shouldn't be doing this, I admitted. That it's too much, too extravagant. It's not extravagant, she said gently. It's gratitude. Gratitude. The word warmed through me. When we returned to the villa, a small surprise waited at the door, a bouquet of white lilies tied with a ribbon. Ruby squealed and dug for the card. Oh my God, Lana, someone sent you flowers. My stomach tightened. Who? Ruby handed me the card. My mother's handwriting. You can still fix this before you embarrass us further. Mom. My skin went cold. Franklin stepped forward immediately, reading my expression. What is it? I handed him the card. His jaw clenched. They found out you're here? Probably from the bank charge, I said quietly. Or maybe Marina stalked my activity. Don't let this ruin your night, May said softly. But I already felt the peace slipping. Ruby looked from my face to the lilies and grimaced. Well, that's creepy. It's intimidation, Franklin muttered. They're escalating. I swallowed hard. I'm fine. But he shook his head. You don't have to be. The rest of the night passed quietly, the four of us eating a dinner prepared by the private chef, a man named Luis who cooked lemon butter salmon that practically melted on the plate. We watched the water glow silver under the moon, talked about small things, school, work, TV shows, anything but the lilies left on the doorstep. Just before bed, Ruby uploaded a short video, a montage of our first day. Sunset, Franklin squinting dramatically, May laughing, me staring out at the ocean with a soft smile I didn't even recognize on my own face. The caption read, "Blood doesn't make you family, love does." I felt something shift inside me, a trembling, a hope. We all went to sleep with the sound of waves hitting the cliffs. But around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. Ruby burst into my room without knocking, her eyes wide with panic. Lana, she whispered, you need to see this. My heart dropped. What is it? She handed me her phone. On the screen, Marina's face filled the frame, tear-streaked, trembling, furious. The title of the video, My Sister Abandoned Us. Here's the truth she's not telling you. The war had begun. I should have known the moment I saw the look on Ruby's face that something irreversible had happened. Her hands were shaking as she held her phone out to me, the screen glowing in the dark. I wasn't fully awake yet, still tangled in sheets, heart sluggish and heavy, when I clicked on the video she'd opened. Marina's face filled the screen, perfect lighting, perfect tears, perfectly calculated. "Hey everyone," she began, voice trembling in the way she knew would make people lean in. "I didn't want to do this, I really didn't, but I can't stay silent anymore, this is destroying our family." My stomach hollowed. Ruby sat beside me on the bed, practically vibrating with rage. "Keep watching," she whispered. Marina sniffled dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "My sister, Lana, she's been spreading lies about us, about me, and it's gotten to a point where I have to defend myself." A cut. A clipped audio segment of my voice. Except it wasn't real, or rather, it wasn't whole. "I don't owe you anything," the audio version of me said, sharper, colder, crueler than I'd ever sounded in my life. My breath caught. "That's not—" "She edited it," Ruby hissed. "I have the original recording. She cut out the part where you said you already paid for her stupid car repair." Another clip. "Maybe if you weren't so selfish—" Except those were words I'd said in a private conversation months ago, in frustration, after Marina demanded I cover her spa retreat while I was struggling to pay rent. But she'd chopped it down, stripped the context, turned it into poison. Marina looked into the camera again, eyes brimming with fabricated hurt. "She says terrible things, about me, about my baby, about our family. I've tried to protect her for so long, but I can't do it anymore." I stared at the screen, numb. "She's painting me as the villain." "Oh, honey," Ruby said softly, "she's not painting you as the villain. She's painting you as the content." Halfway through the video, Marina lifted her phone to show a series of screenshots, texts from me, but only the parts where I was at my breaking point. Not the messages that led up to it, not the gaslighting, not the threats, just the final cracks she'd created. "She's been emotionally unstable for years," Marina whispered, lowering her gaze. "We tried to get her help, we tried to support her, but she refuses. Instead, she punishes us." I felt the pillow beneath me twist in my fist. "She's trying to discredit me." Ruby nodded. "Classic smear campaign. The comments are a dumpster fire." I scrolled down. It was worse than I imagined. "Poor Marina. No one deserves a toxic sister like that. Lana sounds like she needs serious therapy. Where's the baby during all this? Protect River at all costs. Influencers always get attacked by jealous family members. Stay strong, Queen." My throat tightened. One comment stood out. "I found her email. Everyone should tell Lana what we think of this." Beneath it, someone had posted a link. My business email, my professional portfolio, my real estate profile photo. I felt my stomach drop straight through the mattress. "No," I whispered. No, she didn't." "She did," Ruby said. "Keep scrolling." I did. And then I saw it. Pinned at the top of Marina's video description. "If you want to share your support, here's her contact info. She needs to understand she can't keep hurting her family." My chest constricted. She put my contact information. She posted my work email. Ruby swallowed. "Keep going." Then I saw the worst part. At the very bottom of the description, more details in my IG bio. My blood turned to ice. I clicked her Instagram profile. There it was, my condo's old address. Not the one I currently lived in, but the place where I'd spent 3 years alone, terrified of every creak at night. The place that still had my name tied to old mail and parking records. She had posted it, publicly, doxing her own sister. The room tilted. Ruby pressed a hand on my back. "Don't panic. You're here. You're safe." Safe. But what about my career? My safety when I went home? My clients? I couldn't breathe. My phone buzzed suddenly, so loud in the quiet room that I nearly flinched. I turned it over, 24 new emails, 13 missed calls from unknown numbers, 47 new comments on my work profile. The first unread email previewed on the lock screen. "Shame on you. Hope your business fails." My hands trembled. Franklin's heavy footsteps approached the room before I even heard him speak. He pushed the door open without knocking, eyes sharp and alert, his presence grounding the way a mountain steadies the earth. "What's happened?" he asked. Ruby spoke before I could. They doxed her. Marina posted her email and address, and she edited voice notes to make her look abusive. For a moment, Franklin didn't move. He stood perfectly still. Then I saw it. The shift. The tightening of his jaw. The slow inhale. The calm before a storm I knew he rarely let break loose. He sat on the edge of the bed and took the phone gently from my hands. He watched the video without speaking. His face didn't contort or flare with emotion, but something behind his eyes darkened. When it ended, he handed me the phone, carefully, deliberately. "Turn off your notifications," he said. "Franklin, turn them off." I did. He nodded once, firm. "Good, now we fix this." "We can't fix this," I said, voice cracking. "The whole internet." "We can," he said, "and we will." I tried to swallow, but the fear had thickened into something sticky and suffocating. "She's ruining my reputation, my job, my life." Franklin shook his head. "No, she's ruining hers. You don't fight fire with panic. You fight it with truth and proof, and you have both." I closed my eyes, but tears still escaped. "What do I do?" "First," he said, "you breathe. Then you let us take it from here." May appeared in the doorway, her robe wrapped tight around her, worry etching deep lines into her face. "Sweetheart, I saw the video. My God!" I wiped my cheek roughly. "She made me look like a monster." "No," May said, crossing the room and pulling me into a hug. "She made herself look desperate." I laughed, or tried to, but the sound came out broken. "Tell that to the hundreds of people blowing up my inbox." Ruby sat at my other side, wrapping her arms around me. "You don't have to reply to a single one. Let me deal with the social media mess. I'm good at this." "She is," Franklin agreed. "And while she handles that, I'll call the resort security team. We need to notify them about the doxing threat." May squeezed my hand. "And I'll make us breakfast because no one can think straight without pancakes." Despite everything, a small, fragile smile tugged at my mouth. May always believed pancakes could fix anything. For the next hour, the villa turned into quiet chaos. Franklin stepped outside to make calls, speaking in a low, controlled voice that sent goosebumps across my arms. Ruby sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through comments, identifying trolls, reporting accounts, blocking entire clusters of Marina's followers. May cooked, not out of denial, but out of love. The smell of butter and warm batter slowly filled the villa, softening the edges of panic. I sat on the couch with my laptop open, staring at my inbox. New messages still poured in, even with notifications silenced. A cruel email, a mocking comment, a fake client inquiry written just to insult me. And then, an unexpected one, from an old colleague. Subject line, "Saw the video. Call me if you need help." Another from a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. I always knew something was off with them. "You okay?" Someone else wrote, "Don't believe a word she says. You're stronger than this." I blinked, stunned. People were reaching out. To check on me, not to judge me, not to condemn me, not to pile onto the narrative Marina had created. Something loosened in my chest. Maybe I wasn't as alone as she wanted me to feel. Franklin came back inside, shutting the door softly. "Security's aware. They're flagging all incoming unfamiliar vehicles. They've already briefed local patrol." "Local patrol?" I echoed faintly. He hesitated. "Marina said they're coming home early." The words hit me like cold water. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" She said it in a comment thread. Someone screenshot it before she deleted it. She said, "We'll deal with her in person when we get back." The villa seemed to shrink around me. "They're coming home," I whispered. Ruby put her phone down. "Let them come. They're not getting anywhere near you." Franklin placed a hand on the back of the couch behind me, solid and steady. "We protect our own in this family. Our family." The words wrapped around me like armor. Still, fear pulsed beneath my skin. "What do I do if they show up? What do I say? How do I—" "You don't say anything," Franklin said. "You don't open the door. You don't confront them alone. You let me handle whatever happens next." My throat tightened. I don't want you to get involved in something ugly. He gave me a look, one that held decades of grit, loyalty, and a kind of fierce love. Lana, this is already ugly. The only difference now is you're not facing it alone. Tears filled my eyes again, but these weren't from fear. They were from belonging. May came over with a plate of pancakes, setting them in front of me like a shield. Eat, she said gently. The world is easier to face when your stomach isn't empty. Ruby nudged my shoulder. And also because I made a TikTok explaining the truth. And it's blowing up in your favor. I stared at her. You posted something? She shrugged. Only the truth. Nothing mean, no names, just love. My breath trembled. She leaned her head against mine. You're not their victim anymore. I closed my eyes. The ocean roared outside, steady and powerful. Somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the betrayal, the humiliation, the chaos, a new emotion stirred. Strength. They were coming, and I was finally ready to stop running. I woke with the sun on my face and the sound of waves hitting the cliffs below, the kind of morning that should have felt peaceful. But the dread was already there, coiled low in my stomach. I knew what today held. There was no running from it, no pretending it wasn't coming. My parents and Marina were on their way back to California, and based on everything they had done in the last 48 hours, they weren't coming home quietly. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The villa was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet we'd shared the day before. This was a held breath kind of silence, the kind that comes before a storm breaks. I stepped onto the deck. The air was crisp, the water shimmering beneath the rising sun. For a moment the beauty hurt, because it felt temporary, like something that could be snatched away as quickly as it appeared. Footsteps approached behind me. You slept? Franklin asked, his voice still rough with sleep. Some, I lied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded toward the kitchen. Come eat. May's making eggs. There was no small talk at breakfast. No jokes, no teasing, no stories. Just quiet chewing, clinking forks, and the unspoken knowledge that today wasn't going to be easy. Halfway through the meal, Franklin finally said what we were all thinking. They'll show up today. May's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee. Do we know when? No, he said. But they're angry, they're embarrassed, and people like that don't sit with their emotions. They project them. Ruby looked at me. Do you want us with you? My throat tightened. Yes. Good, she said simply. You're not going through this alone. I pushed my untouched plate away and stood. I'll go call the restraining order hotline again. Maybe they... A loud knock cut through the villa. All four of us froze. A second knock, harder. My pulse spiked. They're here, Ruby whispered. No, Franklin said calmly, already rising from the table. Security isn't scheduled to let anyone through without calling me first. Another knock. This one wasn't polite. It was violent. Boom, boom, boom. Franklin's eyes hardened. Stay here, all of you. No, I said, heart slamming against my ribs. I need to see who it is. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but you stay behind me. He walked toward the front door, posture steady, controlled, terrifying in its quiet power. I followed, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. Ruby and May hovered just behind us. When we reached the door, Franklin checked the peephole, then cursed under his breath. What? I whispered. It's them. My skin turned cold. He opened the door halfway, blocking most of the opening with his body. My father stood on the porch, sunburned, furious, his jaw tight enough to crack. My mother hovered beside him, arms crossed, her face a mask of icy disappointment. Marina stood slightly behind them, eyes puffy and wild, phone in hand already recording. There she is, my father snapped, trying to lean around Franklin. Lana, get out here. No, Franklin said calmly, voice firm enough to make even the wind pause. You don't get to demand anything, Dad barked out a laugh, And who the hell are you? Her real family, I thought. But Franklin answered for me. The man who won't let you lay a finger on her. Dad's face reddened. This is family business. Step aside. No. He tried to push forward, but Franklin didn't move an inch. My father's hand hit a wall of muscle and unshakable resolve. Touch me again, Franklin said softly, and you won't like what happens next. My mother stepped forward, voice dripping with theatrical hurt. Lana, sweetheart, this is ridiculous. We came all this way to talk. We deserve a conversation. You don't deserve anything, Ruby muttered behind me. I stepped forward despite Franklin's outstretched arm barring my way. What do you want? My mother gasped as if I'd struck her. What do we want? We want our daughter back. We want our family back together. You posted my address, I said, voice trembling but steady. You posted my contact information. You painted me as unstable, manipulated my words, and put me in danger. Dad scoffed. Stop being dramatic. No one's trying to hurt you. People have been threatening me all night, I snapped. Clients have canceled appointments. My inbox is full of harassment. That's your fault, Marina spat. You brought this on yourself. You humiliated us, Lana. How? I demanded. By telling the truth? The truth, she laughed angrily. You took Grandma's money and ran. My body went cold. You took Grandma's money. You drained the trust fund for 10 years. My father's face twisted. We managed it responsibly. You took multiple vacations, I said. Retreats, luxury stays, all paid for with money meant for me. That money benefited the family, he snapped. Which family? I asked. Silence. He looked away. That was my answer. Marina raised her phone higher, zooming in on my face. Good. Cry. Make yourself the victim. It'll get you more sympathy. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way she wanted. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stepped forward until I stood beside Franklin, chin high. You're not my family, I said quietly. Not anymore. My mother recoiled as if I'd slapped her. How dare you? No, I said. You don't get to, how dare you me? Not after everything you've done. Dad stepped closer. Franklin blocked him again. We want compensation, Dad said through clenched teeth. Marina lost sponsorships because of you. She deserves reparations. You owe her. I stared at them, disbelief flooding through me. You came here to demand money? $200,000, Marina said coolly. Or we go public. My breath hitched. You already went public. Oh, we can go bigger, she sneered. Trust me. I didn't realize Franklin had moved until I saw my father stumble back a step. He hadn't touched him, but he'd stepped forward with enough force that my father instinctively retreated. That's enough, Franklin growled. All of you need to leave. Dad pointed a trembling finger at him. This isn't over. It is, Franklin said calmly. You just don't know it yet. Mom's expression twisted into a pitying smile. Lana, sweetheart, we forgive you, truly, but you need to come with us. No. Then we'll stay here until you do. No, Franklin said. You won't. Marina's eyes gleamed. We're family. The law protects us. You doxed her, Franklin replied. The law protects her. Before any of them could respond, the resort manager rushed up the path with 2 security officers behind him. Is there a problem here? He demanded. Dad pointed at me. We're trying to speak with our daughter. She has a restraining order pending, Franklin said quickly, and they are trespassing. I swallowed hard. I don't feel safe with them here. The manager nodded sharply. You heard her. Leave now, or security will escort you out. If you resist, we will call the sheriff. You can't do that, Mom snapped. Yes, the manager said calmly. I can. Security stepped in, gesturing firmly toward the road. Dad backed up slowly, fury burning under his skin. Marina lowered her phone, lip trembling, not with sadness, but humiliation. Mom looked like she wanted to spit venom. You'll regret this, Dad hissed. No, I said quietly. I won't. Security escorted them down the path. They didn't look back. The moment the gate closed behind them, my knees threatened to give out. Franklin caught my elbow, steadying me. It's over, he said gently. I shook my head. It's not. They're going to escalate. I know they are. Maybe, he said. But you're not facing it alone anymore. Ruby wrapped her arms around me from behind. Damn right she's not. May stepped forward, cupping my cheek. You were brave, sweetheart. I let myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in what felt like hours. But even as relief washed over me, a flicker of warning remained in my chest. Because people like my parents didn't lose gracefully, and Marina didn't burn quietly. But today I'd stood my ground, and for once, they were the ones who had to walk away. I woke the next morning with the strange sensation of floating, like my body was somewhere far away, and my mind hadn't caught up yet. For a few seconds, I didn't know if I was still in Malibu, or if yesterday's confrontation had been some fevered dream powered by adrenaline and fear. Then the sound of waves returned, soft and steady, grounding me. I sat up slowly, the stiffness in my shoulders reminding me everything had been real. My parents had shown up, Marina had demanded money, Franklin had stood between us like a wall, security had escorted them out. And the look on their faces as they left, the rage, the disbelief, the humiliation, stayed with me like a bruise I kept pressing. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and walked out to the deck. The morning air was cool enough to sting my lungs. The horizon glowed with a rosy haze as the sun rose behind the cliffs. Malibu had been paradise for 3 days, but after yesterday, the ocean felt different. Less like an escape, and more like a mirror, showing me everything I didn't want to see. I wrapped my arms around myself and leaned on the railing. Footsteps approached behind me. You're up early, Franklin said, stepping beside me with a mug of coffee. So are you, I replied. He shrugged. Old habits. Used to wake up at dawn on job sites. He glanced at me. How you holding up? I don't know, I admitted. I feel shaken, but also relieved, but also angry, and also guilty for being angry, and then angry at myself for feeling guilty. So, normal human feelings? I snorted softly. Something like that. We stood in silence for a moment before he said carefully, You know they're not done. My stomach tightened. I figured. They'll try something else. They don't accept boundaries, especially ones they didn't set. I nodded, staring at the waves. I don't know how to prepare for that. You don't have to, he said simply, because we'll prepare for you. The we cracked something open inside me, not a wound, something gentler, something like gratitude mixed with grief. Before I could respond, Ruby burst through the sliding glass door like a hurricane. Guess what? Franklin sighed. Your volume is a weapon. I'm sorry, but this cannot wait. She held up her phone, eyes wide. My video? The one I posted last night? It has 12 million views. I blinked. 12 million? 12.4 as of 20 seconds ago. And the comments, oh my God, Lana, people are defending you. Hard, like armies of women telling their own toxic family stories and calling your parents out for being monsters. I blinked again, overwhelmed. I didn't ask you to do that. I know, that's why it worked. There was no pettiness, just honesty. Franklin raised an eyebrow. Did you mention names? No, Ruby said quickly. Of course not, I'm not stupid. I didn't say anything identifiable, just people treat the wrong folks as family. And sometimes your real family is the one that shows up. And then I showed a clip of Lana looking cute on the deck. I wasn't trying to look cute, I muttered. You can't help it, she said dramatically. May stepped out with a tray of muffins, her expression softer than the steam rising from the basket. I heard shouting. What's happening now? Ruby re-explained, adding hand gestures and dramatic flair. May set the tray down, wiping her hands on her apron. Honey, maybe this is a good thing. A good thing? I echoed. It means people see you, really see you. That matters. I swallowed a lump. But Marina will see it too. Franklin nodded. And she'll get angrier. Great. May placed a warm muffin into my hand. Eat. I took a bite, the sweetness grounding me. Food always tasted better when it came from someone who loved you. We spent the morning trying to reclaim some normalcy. Breakfast on the deck, a walk along the shore, laughing at Ruby's failed attempt to fly a cheap beach kite she'd bought at a gas station. It was peaceful in the way life sometimes is, right before everything shifts again. And everything shifted at noon. We had just returned to the deck when my phone buzzed, a notification from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. A second buzz, a third. Then a flood of alerts. Ruby frowned. Why is your phone blowing up again? I thought we turned off your... Then Franklin's phone buzzed too, then May's. A beat of silence. Ruby snatched her phone, eyes quickly scanning notifications. Oh no, she whispered. My heart climbed into my throat. What? She turned her phone around. A new video, posted 1 hour ago, by Marina, titled, The Truth About Our Malibu Betrayal. My stomach dropped. I clicked it. My sister appeared on screen, this time with no tears, no trembling lip. Her expression was cold, tight, furious. Behind her was what looked like her car, parked in some lot. She spoke with clipped enunciation. My sister used our family drama to make herself look good, she began. She took money she didn't earn to rent some ridiculous California vacation house. She's bragging, showing off, pretending she's a victim when she's actually selfish and unstable. My chest tightened. I'm not unstable. She's manipulative, Marina continued, and she's dangerous. Yes, I posted her contact information, but I did that because she's been harassing us for years, and now she booked a luxury trip to punish us. Ruby choked on air. What? That's not even... Franklin put a hand on her shoulder. Keep watching. Marina leaned forward, anger distorting her face. She brought people who aren't even family. She left us behind, abandoned her responsibilities, and now everyone online is praising her. She's using this trip to smear us, to turn people against us. My pulse pounded. I won't let her destroy our family, she said, voice shaking. If she keeps posting her lies, if she keeps weaponizing strangers against us, then we'll make sure the truth gets out. All of it. The camera shook slightly as she exhaled hard. We're going to Malibu, she said. We're going to get our sister back and settle this. The video ended. 12 million views, 2 million comments. My hands went cold. They're coming here. Franklin didn't hesitate. We'll alert security. Ruby grabbed her phone. I'll send them the video. May put her hands on my arms. Sweetheart, breathe. You're shaking. I hadn't realized I was. My chest rose and fell unevenly. She's going to frame me. She's going to make me look unhinged. She's coming here to film whatever happens. She'll twist it. She always twists it. May pulled me into a tight embrace. She can twist anything she wants. The truth still stands. Franklin was already dialing resort security. Yes, this is Franklin Miller. We need to speak with your lead officer immediately. There's a credible threat coming to the villa. Ruby paced, muttering under her breath. These people are actually deranged. Who flies across the state to confront someone on vacation? That's cult behavior. I sank into a deck chair, hands trembling so hard I had to clench them. What if they cause a scene again? What if security can't stop them? What if... Ruby kneeled in front of me. Hey, listen, they're not dangerous. Ruby, Franklin said, lowering the phone. They're very dangerous. Not physically, but emotionally, socially, legally. She swallowed. Okay, but Lana's not alone anymore. They can't manipulate her the same way. He nodded. That's why they're escalating. I closed my eyes, pressing my palms to them until I saw stars. I just wanted a week of peace. And you deserve that, May said, but they won't let me have it. Then we fight for it, Franklin said simply. A knock sounded at the door. Ruby jumped. Already! But it wasn't my parents. It was resort security. 2 officers in Navy uniforms and the head security manager. He held a tablet with the video pulled up. We saw the post. We've increased patrol around the property. No unauthorized vehicles or individuals will be allowed near the villa. Your party is our priority. I exhaled shakily. Thank you. He nodded. If they attempt to force entry or cause a disturbance, we'll contact the sheriff immediately. When they left, the villa's atmosphere remained tense, but some of the panic in my chest finally loosened. For about 20 minutes. Then my phone buzzed again. A screenshot, sent by a friend. It showed a post from a family gossip page under the headline, Influencer Drama, Sister Feud Spills into Luxury Malibu Trip. My name was trending. My parents' last name was trending. My sister's face was everywhere. It felt like being swallowed by a wave I couldn't outswim. Ruby leaned her head on my shoulder. I know it feels like the world is on fire, but none of this is your fault. I nodded slowly. I know. But inside, a cold truth formed. This wouldn't end until there was a line drawn so clear, so unmistakable, that not even my parents could pretend to misunderstand it. And tomorrow, when we went back home to Seattle, that line would have to be permanent. The drive back to Seattle felt nothing like the drive to Malibu. On the way down, the world had seemed full of possibility. Sunlight on water, wind in our hair, the promise of freedom lingering in every mile. But on the way back, the sky was gray and heavy, the air thick with the tension none of us wanted to name. Even the GPS sounded tired when it announced the final turn onto the street leading to my apartment building. Franklin pulled into the lot slowly, scanning every car, every parked SUV, every figure walking their dog or carrying groceries. He didn't speak, but the way his shoulders shifted told me he was preparing for impact, readying himself like he did before bad storms, back when he worked construction. Ruby leaned forward from the back seat, chewing nervously on the string of her hoodie. Okay, I don't see them. Do you see them? I don't see them. I see trouble, Franklin murmured. May pressed a hand to my knee. No matter what's waiting, we're here with you. All the way. I nodded, trying to swallow the dread rising in my throat. I had braced myself for this moment since Marina posted her last video. Since she'd declared she was coming for me, coming to fix her narrative, at the expense of mine. Franklin parked near the entrance and turned off the engine. The silence in the car felt loud. You ready? He asked. No, I answered honestly. But I still got out. My building loomed ahead, 3 floors of neatly painted gray siding and white-trimmed balconies. Quiet, ordinary, safe. Or at least it had been safe once. Now, as I climbed the stairs with Franklin beside me, every step felt like stepping into a trap. When we reached my floor, I saw them. My parents and Marina. Standing directly outside my apartment door. My father's arms were crossed over his chest, his face as red as the last time I'd seen him. My mother carried a thick stack of papers in a folder, always prepared to weaponize bureaucracy. Marina leaned against the wall, sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy sky, her phone held up and recording. Finally, Marina said when she saw us. Took you long enough. Ruby whispered under her breath. Oh, I want to punch her so bad. But it was my father who stepped forward first. We need to talk. Franklin planted himself between us before Dad could take another step. No, you don't. This is none of your business, Dad snapped. Move. I'm not moving an inch, Franklin replied. My mom huffed. This is ridiculous. Lana, sweetheart, tell him to step aside. We're only here to discuss legal matters. Legal matters? I repeated, my voice thin and sharp. You mean the threats, the slander, the doxing? Marina rolled her eyes. It wasn't doxing if the address was public. You posted it, I shot back, with the intention of sending people after me. She lifted her chin. I posted it because you're a liar, and someone has to protect our family's reputation. Our family, I repeated, almost laughing. You lost that privilege the moment you put me in danger. My father scoffed. Stop being dramatic. But the way Franklin stiffened told me he heard exactly how wrong that was. My mom stepped closer, pulling a sheet of paper from her folder. Lana, if you don't publicly retract the false statements you and that girl, she pointed at Ruby, posted online, we will be pursuing legal action. We? Franklin echoed, one eyebrow rising. Who is we, exactly? Mom hesitated. Marina jumped in. Mom and Dad and I. We've agreed. Lana needs consequences. Ruby muttered, Girl, the only consequence you need is therapy. Marina glared. I'm a mother. I don't need therapy. That's exactly why you need therapy, Ruby shot back. Dad snapped. Enough. Lana, this is your last chance to fix what you've done. We demand... And that was when Franklin moved. Not fast, not aggressive, not violent, just deliberate. He took one slow step forward and stared directly at my father. You don't demand anything from her ever again. Dad's nostrils flared. Who the hell do you think you are? Franklin's voice stayed calm. Too calm. The man who will call the police the moment you cross this threshold, Mom scoffed. Oh, please, the man, he continued, who already filed a report last week. That stopped them cold. I blinked. You filed... what? Franklin nodded without looking back at me. Harassment, threats, attempted forced entry, doxing. Marina's face drained of color. Doxing isn't illegal. Actually, Franklin said, pulling out his phone, in our state it is. He turned the screen toward them. A screenshot of the exact law, highlighted. Mom's mouth snapped shut. Dad's bravado deflated like a leaking tire. Marina tried to save face. Whatever, none of that matters. The court will see that Lana is unstable. I have proof. I have messages. You have edited messages, I cut in. Her lip curled. So what? They still make you look... Like what? I asked, stepping forward now too. Like someone who asked for basic respect? Like someone who was tired of being used? Like someone who finally stopped letting you take and take and take? Marina opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to my parents. Do you know why I didn't come on your Aspen trip? Why I didn't want to go on any of your vacations? Why I stopped asking to be included? Mom looked confused, annoyed. Because you're oversensitive? Because, I said, my voice shaking. You never wanted me there. For years, since Cabo, since college, since every moment I needed you. You left me behind, and you told yourselves it was my fault. Dad's jaw tightened. But now, I said, now you need me. Not for love, not for family, for money, for your public image, for your influencer brand. Marina bristled. You don't understand the pressure. Oh, I understand pressure, I snapped. Try working 3 jobs to pay off student loans while your family blows your inheritance in resorts. Try getting 1 meal a day because you're terrified to spend the money in your checking account. Try sleeping in a freezing apartment because you can't afford the heating bill. Silence. Cold, heavy silence. My father shifted. You should have asked for help. I did, I said, and you threatened to have the trust frozen until I was 50 if I asked again. Mom's eyes flickered. You misunderstood. No, you lied. I took another breath. Then, finally, I said the sentence I had been afraid to say my entire life. You are not my family. My mother recoiled. My father went pale. Marina inhaled sharply as if slapped. Ruby squeezed my hand. Franklin didn't move. He simply stood there like a wall I could lean against if I needed to. Mom tried one last attempt. Lana, think about what you're doing. I am, I said, and I'm choosing myself. Dad's voice cracked with fury. You'll regret this. I already regretted 28 years of letting you hurt me, I said. Regret doesn't scare me anymore. Franklin stepped forward again. You were asked to leave. Now it's time. Dad glared. Mom trembled. Marina raised her phone again, hands shaking. You'll look terrible online for this, she whispered. You'll lose everything. Or, I said softly. I'll finally start over. Franklin opened the door to the stairwell, holding it politely, mockingly, for them. Out, he said. My parents stared at me for one last second. Then they left. Marina lingered a moment longer, eyes burning with fury. You think you've won? No, I said. I think I finally stopped losing. She swallowed hard. Then she followed them down the stairs. When the door shut behind them, my knees buckled. But Franklin caught me. Ruby wrapped her arms around both of us. May wiped my tears before I realized they were falling. You did it, she whispered. You finally did it. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed her. The courthouse hallway was colder than I expected. All gray tiles and echoing footsteps. The kind of space that made you feel small even when you weren't. I sat between Aunt May and Franklin on a wooden bench that had probably been here since the 70s, clutching a thick folder of printed screenshots, police reports, timestamps, and statements. Evidence. Proof. The paper felt heavy on my lap, like the weight of everything I'd carried for years was finally visible, finally documented, finally real to someone other than me. Ruby paced back and forth a few feet away, tapping anxiously at her phone. I swear, if that judge asks you a single condescending question, I'm going to throw my iced coffee at him. You're not throwing anything at anyone, May said calmly, even though her hand trembled slightly around her own mug. This judge is supposed to be fair, Franklin reminded her, and Lana's got a case stronger than rebar. Anyone with eyes can see what her parents have been doing. I swallowed, staring at my trembling hands. Doesn't mean he'll grant it. Franklin put a steady hand on my shoulder. He will. I nodded, trying to absorb his certainty like sunlight. A court officer opened the doors at the end of the hallway. Tate vs. Tate, restraining order hearing. My stomach flipped. I stood, taking a deep breath. I was ready. Or as ready as I was ever going to be. Inside, the room was smaller than I'd expected. A judge's bench, a few rows of wooden seating. A table where my attorney, Patricia Whitmore, motioned for me to sit. She was sharp in a navy suit, hair pulled into a tight braid, her confidence the kind you could lean on like a brick wall. Deep breaths, she murmured as I slid into the seat beside her. Judge Reynolds is thoughtful. He asks direct questions. Answer plainly, be honest. I'll handle everything else. I nodded, chest tight. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He was older, with silver hair and glasses perched on the end of his nose. His tone was firm, but not unkind. Ms. Tate, I've reviewed the petition. We'll walk through the evidence. My parents didn't show up. Neither did Marina. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it still stung. A dull ache in the center of my ribs. They had caused all this chaos, all this pain, all this humiliation, and they couldn't even be bothered to show up to the consequences. Let's begin, Judge Reynolds said. Patricia stood and approached the judge with the first exhibit. Your Honor, this is the compilation of posts, videos, and public disclosures made by the respondents. You'll find timestamps of when each was posted, cross-referenced with the complainant's contact records. He read quietly for several moments, turning page after page. He paused at the screenshot where Marina had posted my address. His expression hardened. This address was accurate at the time it was posted? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said. And the respondent explicitly encouraged viewers to contact Ms. Tate? Yes. And there were threats sent to Ms. Tate as a result? My voice felt small when I answered. More than 100 in the first 12 hours. He nodded solemnly. And the attempted forced entry? Patricia handed him the next set of documents, the police report, the stills from my Ring camera showing my father kicking the door, Marina shouting into the camera, my mother blocking the peephole with her hand. Judge Reynolds took one long breath. I see, Patricia continued. Your Honor, given the escalation pattern, the online harassment, the public release of personal information, and the respondent's attempts to confront Ms. Tate in person twice, once at her home and once at a private rental, she is at risk of continued harassment and emotional harm. He looked up at me for the first time. "Ms. Tate, is there anything you'd like to say directly to the court?" I swallowed hard. "I don't want revenge," I said softly. "I just want peace. They've never respected my boundaries, not once. And now, because I finally stood up for myself, they're trying to punish me. I'm scared of what they do next if there's no legal barrier." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Thank you." The entire hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, picking up his pen, "the court finds clear and convincing proof of harassment, doxing, and attempts to intimidate the petitioner. A temporary restraining order is warranted. Effective immediately, the respondents are prohibited from contacting Ms. Tate either directly or indirectly. Any violation will result in immediate arrest." The scratch of his signature was louder than it should have been, like a door closing, like a chain breaking. When he finished, he handed the signed order to the clerk. "This is court law now," he said gently. "You're protected." Something inside me let go so suddenly I nearly swayed. Patricia placed a steady hand on my back. "You did well," she murmured. "Go get some air." Outside the courthouse, the sky felt brighter than it had an hour earlier. Not sunnier, just lighter. Like the clouds weren't sitting directly on my chest anymore. Ruby burst out behind me. "We won!" Franklin grinned. "Damn right we did." May hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're safe now, legally safe." I breathed into her shoulder. I didn't think he'd actually grant it. Franklin shook his head. "Judges don't take doxing lightly anymore. The screenshots made the case." Ruby crossed her arms proudly. "Those screenshots were curated by yours truly." "Screenshots aren't curated," I said, laughing for the first time that day. "Mine are," she said dramatically. We headed to the parking lot together, but instead of going home, Franklin said, "We're stopping at the diner." May nodded approvingly. "Celebration pancakes." I smiled. "You and your pancakes." "They heal the soul," she replied. At the diner, the smell of butter and coffee wrapped around me like a blanket. We slid into a booth, ordered food, and sat in a bubble of comfort I hadn't felt in years. Ruby narrated the hearing like it was an epic battle scene. Franklin nodded through the whole retelling like a proud general. May kept touching my hand every few minutes, as if to reassure herself that I was really okay. For the first time, I believed I would be. A week later, I started packing. Not because I was running, but because I was moving on. Literally. My lease was up, and I'd found a condo across town with a doorman, gated entry, and a quiet little balcony overlooking a community garden. A fresh start. I was in my bedroom, sorting through old boxes, when I found it. The box shoved deep beneath my bed. The one covered in dust, the edges peeling after years of being ignored. I pulled it out slowly. Inside, I found the gifts I'd once bought for my parents. A Bulova watch for my father. Sleek, classy, expensive. A Coach handbag for my mother. Cream leather, gold hardware. I'd bought them 5 years ago with money I didn't have, hoping foolishly that something material might be enough to earn their love. But something in me had stopped short of giving them. Some tiny thread of self-preservation. I stared at the items for a long time. The glass of the watch, the stitched leather of the bag, thousands of dollars of hope I'd never admitted to having. Then I closed the box and drove it to a women's shelter on the other side of the city. The coordinator gasped when she opened it. "These are beautiful. New too? Do you mind if I give them to 2 of the women starting job interviews next week? They could use a confidence boost." My chest thickened. "That's exactly what I want." "Thank you," she whispered. I walked back to my car with tears in my eyes. Letting go wasn't destruction. It was liberation. 3 weeks later, Christmas arrived, like a soft snowfall, quiet, gentle, and without fanfare. May's house smelled like pine and glazed ham. The tree was crooked, covered in Ruby's childhood ornaments, and Franklin's terrible but endearing wood-carved Santa faces. We laughed, we cooked, we wrapped gifts. For once, it felt like Christmas wasn't something I had to survive. After dinner, Franklin motioned for me to follow him into the garage, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "What's going on?" I asked. He handed me a manila envelope. I frowned. "What is this?" "Open it," he said, voice steady but soft. My hands trembled as I slid out the papers. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. Petition for adult adoption. My breath caught. "Franklin," I whispered. "What?" He cleared his throat. "May and I, we talked about it. A lot. And only if you want it. Only if it feels right. We'd like to make this official." My knees went weak. "Official?" "You're our daughter, Lana," he said, eyes shining. "In every way but on paper. And we want the paper too." Tears streamed down my cheeks before he even finished speaking. May appeared beside him, wiping her own eyes. "Only if you want it," she repeated. "No pressure, just love." "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." I didn't even try to stop the sob that broke out of me when Franklin pulled me into a hug. May joined, wrapping her arms around both of us. Ruby burst into the garage 15 seconds later, screaming, "Are we doing this? Are we actually doing this?" We were. That night, surrounded by my real family, I signed the papers and felt something inside me settle into place. A missing piece returned home. I wasn't Lana Tate anymore. I was Lana Miller. And for the first time in my life, my last name felt right. The morning of the open house arrived with a cold, metallic knot sitting right in the center of my stomach. It didn't matter how many deep breaths I took or how much coffee I forced myself to drink. The dread clung to me like fog. I'd worked in real estate for years, handled difficult clients, last-minute cancellations, picky buyers, even a property where a raccoon lived in the attic. But nothing had ever felt as high stakes as this. Because this time, it wasn't just my job on the line. It was my future. It was the version of myself I was trying so hard to become. By noon, I was standing in the master bathroom of a $3 million modern property, fixing my hair in the mirror of a polished chrome vanity. The staging team had left hours ago. Caterers were setting up trays of hors d'oeuvres in the kitchen. Clean, minimalist furniture filled every room, and soft music played through the built-in speakers. Everything was perfect. Everything except the fear that today would be the day my parents decided to blow up my life all over again. When I stepped out into the hallway, Franklin was waiting by the staircase like a sentry. He wore a collared shirt and jeans, looking more like a retired Navy officer than a contractor. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I can be." "You don't have to do this alone." "I know," I said quietly, "but I also need to do it." He nodded, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "If anything happens, I'm right here." Guests began arriving one by one. Wealthy couples, quiet investors, a woman in a tailored gray suit who asked the kind of questions that let me know she'd read the listing sheet at least 6 times. I slipped into my professional rhythm, speaking with a calm clarity I didn't actually feel, guiding people from room to room, highlighting the smart home features, the imported fixtures, the custom cabinetry. My boss, Richard Sterling, arrived around 2:30 p.m. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and intimidating without even trying. He gave me a nod of approval from across the room and checked his watch. "You're off to a good start," he said when I approached. "Keep it up. These buyers mean business." I nodded, adrenaline pumping. "I won't disappoint you." "I know," he said, and for a moment warmth flickered beneath his stern exterior. By 2:45, the open house was fully underway. The property buzzed with chatter. Glasses clinked. Investors murmured to each other. I watched one couple walk out onto the balcony, their fingers brushing along the railing in a way that told me they were imagining the house as theirs. It was working. Until, of course, it wasn't. I was in the kitchen answering a question about the slab marble countertops when Marcus, the head of security I'd hired, approached with a tense look on his face. "Miss Miller," he said quietly, "we have a situation." My heart faltered. "Are they here?" They slipped past the checkpoint with fake names, he said. 2 women, oversized hats, sunglasses, claimed they were representatives from a luxury buyer. My breath caught. Where are they? He pointed toward the living room. And there they were, my mother and Marina, standing dead center in the most expensive part of the house, without disguises now, without shame. My mother threw her arms out dramatically when she saw me. "There she is," she cried, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The thief I've been telling you all about." The entire room turned. Conversations died. Music kept playing, mockingly soft beneath the sudden tension. Marina held up her phone, already live-streaming. "Smile, Lana," she said sweetly. "Show everyone how proud you are of ruining your family." Richard Sterling looked at me sharply. "What is this?" I swallowed. "They are not allowed to be here." My mother placed a hand on her forehead like she was starring in a soap opera. "I feel faint," she declared, staggering toward the couch. "Our daughter betraying us like this, it's too much, simply too much." "Should I call an ambulance?" one of the buyers asked, horrified. "No," Mom cried, suddenly upright and melodramatic. "I just need her to admit what she did." I walked down the stairs slowly, keeping my voice controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, these 2 individuals are people I've filed police reports against. They've been harassing me for weeks. It's a family matter, and I apologize for the disruption." "You liar!" Marina snapped. "You used our trust money to take strangers on a Malibu vacation." It was like she wanted to rip the room in half with her voice. I felt dozens of eyes on me, judging, assessing, wondering. Franklin stepped beside me, his looming presence instantly commanding attention. "Ma'am," he said to my mother, "you are trespassing. You need to leave." "We're her family," Mom shrieked. "We're allowed to be here." "No," Franklin said calmly. "You're not." Marina pointed her camera at him. "You're assaulting us." "This is going on TikTok." "You're free to leave," Franklin replied, "but you're not free to film in a private residence without consent." Richard stepped closer to me. "Do you want us to call security?" "Already handled," Franklin said. Marcus and 2 other officers entered from the hallway. They approached my mother and sister firmly. "This is a private event," Marcus said. "You're not on the list. You need to go." "I'm not moving," Marina spat. Mom flopped down on the sofa dramatically. "I need medical assistance. I can't breathe." The same buyer who had asked earlier whispered, "She seems fine." At that moment, a deep, irritated voice cut through the chaos. "Excuse me," said a man in a tailored suit, stepping forward. "I came to tour a property, not witness a tantrum." My mother gasped. "Tantrum! We are victims!" "No," the man said sharply. "You are interruptions." He turned to me. "Miss Miller, shall we continue the tour?" I blinked. You want to continue?" "I want to buy," he said simply. "And I don't let foolish people get in the way of a good investment." It took me a second to process his words. Then Marcus signaled to security, and 2 officers gently but firmly escorted my mother and sister toward the front door. Marina shouted threats. My mom wailed dramatically, but they were removed. The door slammed shut. The silence afterward was so loud it made my heartbeat echo in my ears. Richard turned to the man in the suit. "Shall we discuss the offer in my office?" "Yes," he said. "And I want this young lady as my agent. Anyone who can keep her composure in a circus like that has my trust." I nearly dropped the folder in my hands. The remaining guests murmured, some impressed, some asking quiet questions, others coming up to me to apologize for what I'd endured. It took everything in me not to break down right there. By 5 o'clock, the open house ended with 3 offers, all above asking price. I'd done it. Despite everything. I'd done it. As I walked out to the parking lot, Franklin leaned against his truck, arms crossed, smiling proudly. "How'd you do?" he asked. "I sold the house," I whispered. He gave me a little nod, the same nod he'd give Ruby when she brought home a good grade. "I knew you would." That night, after the adrenaline subsided and the exhaustion hit, I sat in the quiet of my new condo and let myself feel everything. The fear, the anger, the relief, the triumph. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Franklin. "Welcome home, kiddo. You're safe now." And for the first time in my life, I felt like that word, home, belonged to me. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about everything that had led me here. The trust fund, the lies, the exclusion, the betrayal, the Malibu trip, the confrontation, the restraining order, the adoption papers. And now this, not revenge, reclamation, rebuilding, choosing myself and the people who chose me. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for staying with me. If anything in this hit close to home, if you've ever been excluded, overlooked, used, or underestimated, tell me in the comments. Share your story. You're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, more justice, more healing, more second chances, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and stick around. There are more stories to tell, and I'd love to have you here.